Nixon might have survived this had he not caught himself on tape. The FBI started to investigate the Watergate break-in, and Nixon made the fatal error of ordering the FBI to obstruct the investigation on the spurious ground of national security. He never came to terms with this, President Nixon. He recorded an oral history interview in 1988. His friend and his former aide, Frank Gannon, conducted it, and he asked him, "Do you think there was or could have been a CIA conspiracy to remove you from office?" "Many people think so," Nixon responded. "The CIA had motive. It was no secret that I was dissatisfied with the CIA, with their reports, and particularly with their appraisals of Soviet strength and our other problems around the world. I wanted to get rid of the deadwood, and they knew it. So they had a motive." "Do you think they feared you?" Gannon asked. "No question about it," Nixon said, "and they had reason to." This left Gerald Ford with a tremendous problem. This was the first time a president had fallen through the abuse of secret power in the name of national security. Now, as I reminded you, Nixon once said, "If the president does it, that means it is not illegal." And he also once said, "If it's secret, it's legal." And the question for President Ford and Secretary of State Kissinger and the ambitious and influential White House staffer Donald Rumsfeld was how to stop the secrets from spilling out after Nixon fell from office. Only a few weeks later, October 7th, 1974, we have the Ford Library to thank for these transcripts. President Ford convenes one of his first National Security Council meetings in the White House Cabinet Room. This is 2 months after he takes power. And he says, President Ford does, "Let me start by mentioning a problem we have concerning the use of classified material. What had happened was that the United States was preparing to ship billions of dollars of weapons to Israel and to Egypt in the pursuit of peace in the Middle East. And the New York Times had printed the Israeli shopping list. This is intolerable," Ford said. "I've discussed several options on how to deal with it with Don Rumsfeld. I want a plan within 48 hours on how to stop the press from printing this." The Defense Secretary, Jim Schlesinger, said, "We don't have the tools we need. We need an Official Secrets Act." This is what the British have. The government can bar anything from being printed. President Ford struggled with this. And throughout the next year, he ran into an almost impossible situation for any president. The Congress wanted to investigate the CIA, and in doing so, they would expose 30 years worth of secrets. As President Ford said, if these things come out, it will blacken the reputation of every president since Truman. He said this, I still don't believe this happened, at a meeting with the editors of the New York Times that was off the record. And some curious editor, no one remembers whom, I've talked to every living participant in this, some curious sub-editor in the Washington Bureau said, "Like what, Mr. President?" "Like assassinations," President Ford said. And then he sort of clamped his pipe down on the desk and said, "That's off the record." And the whole meeting was off the record. Amazingly, the New York Times kept it off the record. But it is impossible to keep secrets in this country. It is really almost impossible. The government is the only ship of state that leaks from the top. So it came out. All the secrets came tumbling out one by one, before Congress even ginned up an investigation, that the CIA had spied on Americans, that the FBI had spied on Americans, that the National Security Agency had spied on Americans. All of these secrets came out at the end of 1974, in the 4th month of Gerald Ford's presidency. The Director of Central Intelligence, Bill Colby, sent a long note to Henry Kissinger at Christmas Eve, 1974, boiling down in 5 pages what Henry Kissinger called the horrors list Kissinger informed the president that the CIA had indeed spied on the left, wiretapped newspaper reporters, placed them under surveillance, conducted illegal searches, but there was a lot more. And Kissinger did not dare to put into writing to the president what he had learned from what he called the horrors book. Some of the CIA's actions were, quote, clearly illegal, unquote, he warned President Ford. Others raised, quote, profound moral questions, unquote. Now, President Ford had served for a decade on the very small CIA subcommittee in the House of Representatives that oversaw the CIA's budget. And he'd never heard a whisper of these secrets. Domestic spying, using LSD on unwitting guinea pigs, and assassination attempts. Human guinea pigs, I'm sorry. Conspiracies to commit murder had started in the White House under President Eisenhower. And on January 3rd, 1975, Ford gets another bulletin, and this one from the acting Attorney General of the United States, Lawrence Silberman. He learned about the thick file of these secrets that was in the CIA's office, in the CIA Director's office safe. He is the nation's highest law enforcement officer at this point. He mousetraps the Director of Central Intelligence. And he says, you have to hand over the files, or it's obstruction of justice. It wasn't a question of Colby's wanting to spill the secrets. It was a question of going to prison to protect them. And this was the dilemma that faced the Director of Central Intelligence. Silberman, some of you know that he is a very conservative federal appeals court judge in Washington to this day. And he led a devastating investigation of the CIA in 2005. He wrote a memo to President Ford, same day, 3 January 1975. He raises two issues. One, quote, plans to assassinate foreign leaders, which, to say the least, present unique questions, unquote. A meeting convenes that night in the White House. President Ford, Vice President Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, and Don Rumsfeld. Ford says, quote, the CIA would be destroyed, unquote, if these secrets ever come out. Rumsfeld pledges to mount, quote, a damage-limiting operation, unquote, for the president. And he takes charge of determining how many, if any, of the secrets of the CIA that the president would share with the Congress and the American people. Needless to say, this damage-limiting operation did not work. But it left Donald Rumsfeld and his successor as the White House Chief of Staff, Dick Cheney, with a very strong sense of how presidents should keep secrets and how presidents must maintain the flow of information lest the secrets damage the power of the presidency itself. It's a real dilemma, and I am not belittling the positions of President Ford or laterally of Mr. Cheney and Mr. Rumsfeld. It is a real dilemma. How do you run a secret intelligence service in an open society, in an open American democracy? Can you? We must. We have to have intelligence. We have an intelligence service. Without intelligence, soldiers die. This struggle went on throughout President Ford's years in office. The White House really feared political destruction if these secrets come out. In the Oval Office, October 13th, 1975, the president and his men meet to assess the damage. And the president asks the question, can we go to courts to stop the Congress from spilling these secrets? Rumsfeld says, quote, we are better off with a political confrontation than a legal one.